Hey, what's up? My name is John Bonjour. I am a comic book artist and film enthusiast. I am going to be drawing some art. Today we are discussing how to ink a comic book page. Welcome back to this comic page. We have our penciled version of the page, and I'm going to be showing you how to do some inking. So, generally speaking, my process: come in, lower the opacity. If you get on the right layer, lower the opacity somewhat so that you can draw over it and it won't be hard to differentiate which is which. Make sure your color is correct, which is black. Now, some people say that you shouldn't ink with pure black. Some people say that you should absolutely always ink with pure black. I think it depends on the comic, it depends on the style, it depends on a lot. That's a really high level decision, like I was saying before, and I think it just depends on what you're going for. The tone can be completely different. Different colored inks will bring a very different energy and vibe to the art, so just experiment with that a little bit and see what works for you and what you think is good. Similarly, brushes change everything. For this version, I'm going to be using just the classic studio pen because I want to show that you can ink with pretty much anything and it can work. I also bought a couple of pens from Clayton Henry. Highly recommend those, the Ink Bleed pens. I'll try to link his store in the description, but I've gone through and edited a couple of those pens, and then pretty much any of these will work. I think some of them work, again, better than others. It just depends on what you're going for. Some of them are harsher, some of them are smoother. Just depends on what look you're going for. For me, my comic that I do, Edge of Border Town, which is on my website, johnbonart.com, for free, I always use the Clayton Henry brushes. Now, I've gone in and edited some of the settings on those, so they are different from how he sells them. But yeah, that's the brush I use just because it gives me a stronger, more graphic feel. In this case, though, I do feel like because our character is a little bit more Muppet-y and cartoony, I'm just going to go classic studio pen, and we're going to get started. Now, keep in mind, remember that I have these panel borders, and that's going to be incredibly hard to ink with those panel borders on there, so I'm going to turn those off for now. I've got a layer here with nothing on it, and that's going to be my inking layer. You can rename your layers. I think it's kind of a waste of time. That being said, the number of times that I go in and have to keep trying to remember, hey, what layer is what on? So I don't know, maybe that would be good. I'm just a little bit lazy to do it. So I'm going to go through the whole process on this first panel here, and then same as the last video, I'll skip through the next three, talk about this one, and then this one as well. So let's start with this first panel. A couple of things to keep in mind, just basic things with inking. Line weight is a game changer, and it's something that takes your art from feeling pretty flat and bland to extremely dynamic. So in this case, I'm going to come in and start inking, and inking is just finalizing the lines on your characters. So I'm going to come in and get Frog Boxer going here. Hold the eye, and you want to make sure that you can use a tool that'll let you vary your line weights. So coming in here like that, you see how it goes from that to that to that. The heavier the line is, the darker, the stronger the line is, the more it feels dark. So you want to make sure you're using those for dark areas on the character. There's a lot to say about inking, but it's not really as set and clear. It's harder to kind of format, so I'm going to be kind of bouncing around a lot. One quick thing to note, you want to keep the balance of your inks. What I mean by that is the way that muscles work, the way that character shapes are, it's something along the lines of that. So it's that general feeling for everything. In this case, this would come here, this would come here, and they just kind of fold into each other. Obviously, we won't see all of that, but keep it in mind when you're inking and when you're penciling. That's how you kind of format a character, and that'll let you know where to end lines like this one. I'm also a firm believer in there can be absolutely too much line work. You can over detail a project in a page, and I think it does take away from it. I also think you can do too little. So in this case, like, I'll give you an example of what too much might look like. Let's say, because you would have technically the way that his body would work, you'd have those kind of ribs there. Let's say you came in and added some texture here, and then you wanted to really show that it was folding there. And yeah, you want to add some shading. Maybe you want to make sure that the clear depth of line is there. Maybe a little more shading, and then you want to do some cross hatching, which is this. It's a shading technique in ink, and you'll just do that to make sure that they know it's in shadow. And all of a sudden, it looks okay, but in my opinion, for what I'm going for this character, it doesn't really work. It's too much going on, and just imagining a page full of that amount of detail, it would be a lot to take in for the eyes. But knowing that all of that's there, I can come in, And let's say I did like having a little bit of that there. So we'll do those. And then, yeah, you know what? I liked having this here too. So we'll do something like that. I think it provides a little bit more. Actually, I'm going to take this out and instead I'm going to add in some shading. Now, if you're inking someone else's pencils, a lot of these decisions will happen in the pencil stage. And it's not really smart to completely fundamentally change what the pencils are showing unless it's your own pencils. If you're doing your own book, change whatever you want. It's your book. You're not going to get offended. Or if you do, you know, sort that out with yourself because that's really concerning. I am worried about why you would do that. But if it is somebody else's pencils, you have to remember that you're part of a team and you can't just make decisions. That being said, you do have to take some creative liberties. Inking is not just going over pencils. Inking isn't just tracing. You get to make decisions. You get to provide value to the art. In this case, just a little cross-hatching can really add some shape and form. Now you also want to remember that you can add a lot of texture with very simple lines. So in this case, Frogboxer is a guy who gets in a lot of scrapes. So I'm just going to give him literally that, a lot of scrapes. Just little lines like that can add so much texture and value to the character that you wouldn't really think about. And in this case, you know, let's give him some real like injuries, some scars. I think that'd be fun. Who knows? Don't do too much, don't do too little. It's all about finding that balance. Usually finding that balance, this is part of why I like to work digitally. Usually finding that balance is just kind of trying things and deciding, nah, that feels too heavy, that feels too light. All that is just stuff you get to kind of learn. You really can't learn that kind of thing without just practicing it. So I think just get out there and ink some pages. I'm gonna come here. The other thing you wanna remember with inking, you don't have to get every line as it would be in the image. Like you don't have to have everything be exactly as it would appear in real life. Sometimes just kind of gesturing at the idea of what it looks like. So in this case, like the ruffles on these shorts, whatever the seam is called there, drawing each and every individual line, yeah, you could totally do that, but it might take up too much time and it might end up looking a little bit uncanny, a little bit too realistic, but not realistic enough. But having something like this, I'll take away the pencil layer for a second, it gives the idea, the definition of what you're going for without giving too much, without adding too many details. You want to be really careful how many details you're adding because you don't want to overwhelm the viewer. So I'll come in here, draws a little frog ass. There you go, little guy. Look at that. Look at that definition. Again, considering line weights with everything that you're doing, a line that is just flat is always going to be more boring than a line that starts one way and ends the other, or even starts one way, ends the same way, and gets thick in the middle like that. Those are always going to be more interesting and just more natural to look at. Another thing, if you are using Procreate, you can kind of format the button. So I've got this middle button here and that just straightens a line, saves yourself so much time. I highly recommend doing digital inking. There's a lot of people that say physical is way better. I inked the first issue of Border Town physically and I loved it, so I see the value in it, but I also think that there's a lot of value in digital inking. Another cool thing about digital inking, you can come in here and let's say I want to add some shadow to this guy. Instead of having to come in and physically color in each line, you can just pull the color over and drop it in and it'll fill. You just have to make sure, like in this case, you can't have an open-ended kind of thing there because it'll fill the page. So that's not great. Come in here, give a little more definition. And this is what I was talking about. Ooh, actually, there's another thing. That's funny. The thing that you don't want to do is have two lines matching up exactly. So I originally had his leg kind of coming down there. There's something about the line of the leg here connecting with the line of the shadow here that just doesn't work for our brains. So you always want to offset that a little bit. I don't know what it is. I'm sure there's a science behind it. I'm not sure what the thought is. I just know you never want to do that. Come in here and give a little more detail. There we go. Inking is fun because most of the work has been done for you already, so you get to just kind of play around with the characters and the space and really define it. It's one of those things where if I ever were to hire out people for my comic, I probably would never hire out an inker, just not because it's not valuable, but because A, I'd have to redo all of my penciling styles and figure out how to get it way more defined, and B, I just kind of love it. I would absolutely hire out a letterer if I could or wanted to, and coloring, you know, I think if I found the right person, I would hire out. But I'm also a little bit anal about how everything comes out, so might not be the person to ask. In my character design, I kind of forgot that I wanted to have these be taped up a little bit, like they'd kind of been through a lot. So we're just gonna pretend like that was the plan the whole time. Look at that. There, I'm filling in more black. I'm gonna add some kind of texture lines to that as well. And I think for this shadow, that's a good place that I can add some cross-hatching. I suppose it's not cross-hatching. What would you call that? Hatching? Not sure. So this is what I'm talking about when I talk about line weight. This is what I mean. I'm gonna bump it up here, size up to, I don't know, I don't have specifics, but then we're gonna see, yeah, that feels good. Coming in, I'm just gonna get the outline real quick so I can show you. This is what I'm talking about. You can have heavier lines, and that indicates that your character or object or whatever it is closer than the further away object. Your viewer's eye is automatically kind of drawn to the heavier lines. So in this case, for this panel, you'll see this guy and then you'll kind of see Frogboxer. It's just a great tool. It's one of those things you don't really think about until you need to, and one of those things that takes your art from pretty amateurish to next level. Another thing you can think about while you're inking is how to texture things. So in this case, we've got a metal texture here, and that's gonna be very different than, say, the leather here. You wanna make sure you're blocking out in a way that feels different, in a way that adds the texture, adds the sort of feel and glossiness and sheen that you're looking for. In this case, you can see that that texture is very different from the texture of Frogboxer, let's say, or like I was saying, the leather here. It's a completely different texture, and it's something that you have control over as the inker that pretty much nobody else does. I would say the only other person who has that level of control over texture is the colorist, but even then, I think that there's just a difference to what inking can bring. And there you go. Like I was saying, this side of the panel is much heavier. The lines are darker, there's more kind of filled in blacks. It all is just a lot heavier, and your eye is immediately drawn right here, which is good. You want it to be. You want to feel that threat of this character kind of looming over Frogboxer, which is all done through a combination of framing and inking. Now I'm going to go through and fill in a lot of these, keeping in mind that a lot of the details on the back here are going to be A, covered up by word balloons, and B, not that important to the general thing. We're just adding an ambiance and a feel and a little bit of a texture to showing where they are in the world, so it doesn't have to be super detailed, super important. I'm gonna do that real quick and I'll get right back to you. Some very insightful thoughts from Drawing John that I haven't recorded yet. I wanna interrupt this video for just 1 second and talk about our sponsor. This video is brought to you by you. I have a Patreon. It's a place where people who really enjoy what I'm doing, my comic, my YouTube channel, pretty much anything else I'm doing. It's a place for you to support the work that I'm doing, but also get some pretty cool stuff out of it. I do a blog that I call Creative Ramblings, which just touches on whatever I'm feeling creatively, things that I'm interested in, just what's going on in the world, pretty much anything that I feel inspired to write about. I do monthly member exclusive art, and there's usually a discussion around what that's gonna be. You also get new pages of Edge of Bordertown a full business week early, which is pretty cool. And if you have a little bit extra and my work means something to you, I could really use the support. So thank you for giving that a shot. It's patreon.com/JohnBonjour. I really appreciate it. Let's get back to the video. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back and I have had a scone. That feels important for me to know that you know. We're gonna come in here. You can see that I have inked these other panels. Pretty simple stuff. Couple of things of note. One, just keeping the texturing of having like little scratches and stuff on him, just because I think that's fun to do. And two, we have the stubble here, which is just random little tick lines just done to your heart's content. That's pretty much it. It's honestly, most of drawing and inking is just doing stuff until you think it's right, which I don't know if that's the way to think about it, but it's certainly the way I think about it. We've got sort of an angry man. Yep, we got it. Okay, big punch moment. Couple of things to note about big punch moment. One, we want to keep the same, not the same, but the idea of the line weight that we had here, we want to keep that here because it's going to be breaking through panels. It's going to be kind of coming at the viewer right here. And two, we want to consider the motion of this punch right here. So there's going to be two things that I'm going to be doing, and I'm just gonna barrel through them and teach you guys some pretty cool stuff. So we're going to start here, get that higgledy-piggledy nose. Man, I really got the scone energy flowing through me right now. Coming in here. We're gonna, you know what? I'm gonna make his eyes closed because he's getting a punch up. He should be in pain. Make him all scrunched. Make sure you get that back in there. Couple more details. Don't forget. You know what would be fun, actually? Yeah, you know what? I don't see why not. We're gonna have his eye patch coming off here, because I think that's funny. And then, who knows what happened to this guy? He's got a big old hole. Maybe not audio, you should take out of context. Come in here, make sure you get all the little creases and folds right. Get his giant stash going. And a tooth coming out here. Maybe I'll do that again. I like that. Also, don't forget that this is gonna have a little rope. Little, what do you call that? String? Strap? I don't know. It'll be coming behind his head there. This is all fun. Everything you want to do in like an action sequence is just make sure it all has motion. In this case, the strap coming off, the guy being pushed to the side here like he is. It's all got just a lot of motion, a lot of energy to it. And that's what you want. You want your action sequences to be engaging. And if they're slow and boring, I mean, you've seen a slow, boring action movie, I'm sure. It's just not that fun to watch. Taken. Taken is a great example of just very slow, boring action. It's also edited way too much, but that's not the point of this video. You don't have to hear my thoughts on Taken. It's not great. Those are my thoughts. It's okay. Taken 2 though, not good. Taken 3 is even worse. You can see that I've got my stubble. Like I said, it's really just kind of random. It's not supposed to fill in the full space where the stubble would be. It's just supposed to give you the general impression of stubble, and then a lot of the coloring is going to change how that works. Make sure you keep your lines fluid here. By that I just mean, like, yes, we're getting strong angles like his head, but you don't want to have a guy, I think I did some of this in penciling, you don't want to have a guy getting punched, right? You get the same angle of the head, and then he's just like, oh no, bummer, that sucks. Like, you want to make sure that he's got that full fluid motion. He's being punched. There's a movement and an energy to the way that he's being punched. That's important to keep in mind whenever you're doing these kinds of scenes, because that's how you make an action scene land. His jacket is another great way to show motion. And we gotta make sure we get his shirt in here as well. Folds in clothing are always fun, and by fun I mean kind of the worst sometimes. Just remember, like in this case, his shirt would be folding from that point out because that's where most of the folds are. So just try to do that. Try to make it seem about right. I find that generally speaking, and again, this might be horrible advice, generally speaking, I find you're probably okay if you don't get it exactly right. As long as you get it somewhat right in a way that feels natural, that's all that really matters. So I'm gonna come in here and fill in a lot of the blacks of the jacket. I'm also going around the edges here, making them just a little bit heavier because I really want to draw the eye there. I want to draw the eye to the guy being thrown out of the panel and not so much the guy doing the throwing. I don't know what that hand's doing. He's just kind of, he's not thinking about it. He's getting punched. He's kind of throwing Spider-Man hands, but that's okay. You'll see that I'm also making the folds kind of with the outlines and the solid blacks and whites. It's another way to do it. If you're gonna have like a black piece of clothing, you can sort of suggest folds and it'll be enough to make people understand what's going on without actually being necessarily exactly how it would look. Like that. And then you can even come in here, add some to it, maybe even add a little highlight if you want to make it real shiny. I don't think I do though. I want it to be kind of dusty. There you go. Keep this pretty vague here. just because I think we want the focus not necessarily on those details, so I'm just gonna leave that as is. And yeah, I think that's actually really good. So then this is gonna come here. I'm keeping in mind where Frogboxer is so that I don't cross lines with him. Apparently there is a street race going on outside, so we're just gonna keep on keeping on here. There we go. And this is all actually coming out really good. I'm very proud of it. Ooh, my classic segment. John forgot he was recording a video. So yeah, we're just filling in these blacks, making sure we get that all right here. I think inking more than anything else, comics-wise, art-wise, that you do, inking is the first thing to kind of get easy and feel more natural at least it was for me. Who knows if that's true for everybody. Penciling is a thing that takes longer to figure out and make sure you have right. Inking is one of those things that kind of ends up being relatively easy to, I say as I make a mistake, relatively easy to get right and to figure out like how to do and feel out and just judge as you're doing it. But who knows? I'd be interested to hear for the comic creators watching this, what was the first thing that kind of clicked for you in the creation process? There we go, get that hand in there. All right, we are feeling good. Just like a belt of some sort. Let's see, his legs. Where's his other leg? So this one's gonna come down here, go here. This one we might kind of fill in there, so I'll wait for a second on that. But this one, should be pretty easy. Just a simple, well, that looks incredibly wonky. There we go. Give him like a little belt or boot thing going here. Yeah, that seems good. Maybe add a shadow to it so it feels further back. Yeah, that's good. And I'll have that come in here. I like it. Okay, so like I was saying, there's another thing we kind of have to consider here, which is the motion of the arm. There's a lot of ways to do motion, but the way that I like to is if you know that your motion is going this way, make sure any perpendicular lines are not done straight, but more like that. That'll show the motion. Now in this case, because that motion is going along the arm line, this is gonna be, and I just like to get these in first. This is gonna be one of those. You'll see just any shading that I do here is gonna be one of those. This will probably be something along those lines. And then this is going to be that, but because it's kind of the bottom end of it, it wouldn't really make sense for that to be that. I don't know if that made any sense. And then I'm gonna bring the glove up a little bit just so that we can see it here. And I think that's good. So then you can come in, fill in the rest of your lines. In this case, because that's more texture than anything else, the tape, I'm not gonna add those lines to it, but I will kind of throw some of that on there. There you go. That's a way to kind of show that there's a little bit more motion going on. And I'm even gonna bring this down a little bit as we get further back, the size of that brush. Remembering the musculature that we designed, the way that we had it set up. There you go, Frogboxer is going. Now that we have that arm, I can come in and add this guy's other leg here. We'll just assume it's coming back this way. That works. Give him his other boot. Oh, terrible. Awful work. There we go. And that's gonna be an even more shadow just because I don't want it to be as clear and it's not the focus. Might even come in and... There's a word for that. I really would like to remember what it is. Again, not forgetting that we want to make sure he always has the same general texturing. You don't have to care about where exactly they are because no one's going to care. No one's gonna notice. And that's a beautiful thing just about comics in general, something to remember. You don't have to be perfect. As much as we would like it to be, as much as artists would like every piece that we put out to be our magnum opus, people don't really care. And that sounds sad, but it's just true. People don't spend that long looking at a comic page. You might because you're a comic book artist or you'd like to be a comic book artist. But the people that read comic books, just generally speaking, your audience isn't going to spend that long staring at each individual panel on a page. So you can kind of fudge a couple of things. You can have some things not be as detailed. You can make mistakes, and it's okay. I guarantee there are lots of things that if I were to redo it, I would absolutely change about Edge of Bordertown. Each issue has a thing that I look back on it. One, if I'm lucky, it's one, but at least one thing that if I look back on it, I go, ooh, that didn't quite come out how I was hoping. But it's okay because people don't scrutinize your art in the same way that you do. And I feel like that's important to remember just in general as artists. People aren't looking at the art the same way you are. They're not looking at it with the same aggression toward it as you are because you made it. And so you see every decision and thought that went into it. Most people don't. That's kind of beautiful because that means you don't have to think about that. Of course, does that really help when you're in the middle of it? Probably not. I know that I still, to this day, have struggled with making everything feel perfect and exactly as I was hoping it would, and it never does. And that's just part of the job. It's never gonna feel exactly how you want it to. Inking is the same way. It's never gonna come out the exact way that you want it to, and that's okay. I'm gonna add a little shading back here just to show that it's behind. That helps a lot with depth. You always want to be thinking about the depth of your image. You always want to be making sure that things are going behind other things and that you're making it clear that they're behind and not next to or in front of or anything like that. You want to make your depth easily readable because, again, people don't look at it for that long. So if you make it hard to figure out, hard to read, they're just going to kind of skip over it and then it's going to get frustrating to read. So in this general moment that I start to realize just how vague my pencils are and kind of decide for myself what I want this to look like. So I don't want to be running into panel borders. So I'm gonna kind of bring that toe up a little bit, get in the webbing. There you go. I think we are good aside from a couple of detailing things on that panel. A lot of times in an action panel, you don't really have to think too hard about like, say, what your background is or what's going on behind because you want the focus to be this action. Also, and this is just another beauty of digital art, I think that eye might be a little off. Yeah, that's much better. Bring it forward, it keeps it in the design of the general character. That looks much better, like eons better. Is that a measurement of betterness? Anyway, there you go. There's that last panel. I'm gonna go in and, oh, you know what? I'm just gonna fill that in with black again, just for depth's sake. Depth's sake. There you go. There's that last panel. You got the action, you got the motion. It hits hard and it's fun to look at. Change that a little. Solid punch panel. I'm gonna go in and ink this and we'll talk about it real quick right at the end. As you can see, I've got this panel just about inked up. We're almost done there. A couple of things I wanted to touch on. Just an interesting textural thing. You can see it's almost cross-hatching, but if you separated it from, instead of crossing over, it's like a deconstructed cross-hatching. I'm sure that there's terms for all of these. I want this bar to feel a little bit grody, a little gross, just not quite pristine, let's say. So I wanted to make sure that we had some of those texturing elements that kind of made it feel that way. Another thing I did was for a lot of things you'll notice on the underside of the bar here, on these picture frames, I didn't use full straight lines. The only thing that I used corrected straight lines for was for like the doors here, and you can see these ceiling tiles and some of those things. But I wanted to make sure that it felt a little bit more natural, a little bit weathered and older. And I think the straighter your lines are, the less natural, the less aged, the more new and simple and futuristic they feel. So I wanted to keep away from that and make sure it felt like just a weird dive bar kind of thing. I'll come in and texture the floor with old stains maybe. A lot of that's going to come into coloring. Speaking of coloring, a thing we're going to touch on way more in coloring than we do here, but a quick note, layers are vitally important. So I had those on a different layer. You can see this is my ink layer. I'm going to come in here, bring another layer under because I've got an idea for this This is going outside. We don't want to see what's actually outside, so I'm just going to come here, fill this in with black, leaving some kind of random things, and then I'm going to come in and fade it in here so that it kind of looks like it's starting to just become visible on the outside. And then obviously I've covered up my art and that looks like dog shit, so I'm just going to bring the opacity down a little bit so that I can see through it. Come in here and just erase everywhere. There's probably a more efficient way to do this, but this works. But I use layers for inking all the time, constantly. It's important because if you want to have like a foreground and a background, let's say you want the foreground to be in focus and the background not to be, doing those in 2 separate layers means you have to do a whole lot less lasso tool selecting and correcting, way easier. Now in this case, I could use the lasso tool. I guess that would work, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to come in and do it here this way. And there you go. Correct that. Bring that opacity back up, and you can see kind of what I had in mind there. It looks like he's falling back into the night, which is fun. And then the last thing I wanted to show you, and this will be more color, but I like to do these kinds of effects right now, just because it's, I don't know, easier. I'm going to come in here with a white, and I'm going to remove the background color so you can barely see what's going on here, but you can tell this is where our guy is, and we'll adjust to the paneling for that. Then I'm going to come in here, keeping in mind that he's there. I will use adjusted lines for this, just so that there's straight lines come in. I'm gonna give us just some general motion lines, and then I'm gonna be doing like an effect kind of thing to them, so that'll be hopefully kind of cool. This is the thing I've done a lot for Border Town, and it's little details like this that don't seem like they would make that much of a difference, but they make all the difference. And here, we'll probably have to come erase some of that. Actually, guaranteed we will have to erase some of that. Motion lines are a comic book staple. You got to get used to using them. You don't have to, I suppose, but I think that they're important to get used to using. And like I said, this would be something I would probably do in the inking, or in the coloring, but I'll do it in the inking just so we don't forget. So then I'm gonna come here, come in and give it a motion blur. Slide that so that it is just a little bit blurred. Kind of move your pencil around, find out what works best for you. I like that. And then I'm gonna bring it, I don't know, down to like 30 for now, and when we do the colors, we'll figure out what actually is the best. But we're gonna get rid of that for now. And that, come in here, drop in our lines, our borders, and then we'll come erase the border here so that he'll be fully breaking through. Hopefully that is as dynamic as it looked in the pencils. If not, that would be pretty awkward. Oh yeah. Oh, low power mode. Cool. There we go. All right, and see, now this is a thing that I'm gonna come and adjust because this line looks a little bit too much like the panel line, and I don't want those to be confused at all. So, I forgot I was on white here. Don't want those to be even remotely confused. There we go. Okay, ooh, too heavy. I almost got through this video without royally screwing up. There we go. That feels much better. That still is not quite right, is it? I might come in and adjust this foot at some point just because it feels like it's right on that line. Or you know what else I could do? Oh yeah, that's much better. Okay, new thing. Totally fundamentally changing it. I'm gonna come in here and here. Make sure those are fixed. Yeah, I like that much better. So he's just gonna be popping out of the panel on that side, not on his foot. And for that foot, we'll just do what we've been using before, which is just that hash, whatever you call that. Bringing that, pulling it out of focus. Yeah, there we go. Now, if you want to, you can even throw in a couple more action, little, just like almost debris coming out of that action. Just adds another little texture. little fun element. So there you go. That is gonna be our inked page. I can come in and bring those into one layer, merge those down. This all looks good to me. I did just have one quick thought. I think I'm gonna try something because I think that it would be more dynamic. I can even make him feel a little bit more angular if we want to. There we go. I think I did it, we'll see. Yeah, okay, I actually like that. Just looking at the page from a graphic perspective, I think it's more fun. It's a little more balanced having blacks here, here, and down here. That kind of keeps your eye moving across the page. Actually, that's interesting. You can kind of catch black here, then filled in black here. This whole panel is black. Catch here, jump down to here, back up to here. That page reads beautifully, even better than I planned. Wow, I am just an incredible artist. You guys are so lucky to be learning from me. Okay, hubris aside, I am proud of this page and I do think it came out good. Let's take out the pencils and there you go. That is an inked comic book page. And there you have it, how to ink a comic book page. This is, as I say in all my other videos, not exhaustive. There's a lot more to say about inking. There's so much more. There's things that I don't know that other people would know. Obviously, I'm inking digitally, so that is kind of a different process than physically inking. There's a lot more to talk about, but I hope that this means something to you. I'm gonna be doing a follow-up video at the end of this series. Obviously, I'm gonna go into coloring and lettering, but if you have any specific questions, leave them in the comments below, and I will do a video answering those questions if there are any. Thank you so much for watching this video and checking out my channel. If you'd like to hear more of my thoughts on art, comics, movies, TV shows, anything, hit the like button, hit the subscribe, and comment down below what you'd like me to talk about next. Or do none of that because I am not your dad.